you guys got me. You got me good. I did my end of the year tier list for 2024, and you guys rightfully noted that I had not watched Orb on the Movements of the Earth. And that was a grave mistake because it was one of the best anime of the year, and I can't believe I missed it. Those weekly discussions must have banged, but here we are now in the year of 2025. I binge watched Orb and I greatly enjoyed it. So consider this a sort of mini review, an addendum to my tier list by the end of the year, where I will be placing Orb obviously on the S tier of peak fiction because it is one of the best anime of the year. I initially skipped out on Orb because I read the synopsis and it seemed profoundly uninteresting to me. I've never been a science geek. I'm not a particular enthusiast of the cosmos. I don't know much about stars or it's just not something that is in my field of interest. And so I skipped it because of the synopsis, but grave mistake. I can't believe how many times I've made the same mistake during my life, and I keep repeating it over and over, which is anime, the pure aesthetic and the passion with which is made can make anything seem interesting. Anything at all. I could not care less to watch a volleyball game, and yet Chikyuu is one of my favorite anime of all time. I have never in my life watched a single basketball game. I just do not care about basketball, and yet Kuroko no Basket was very enjoyable. Anything can be made interesting through anime. Truly anything. And Heliocentrism was not something I ever expected to enjoy, and yet it was very entertaining. The more fiction I watch and read, the more I realize that it is unfortunately true that the premise is the least important part of a story. And this may seem controversial, but especially in anime, how many anime have we seen with a banger premise? The first episode, you're just so engrossed in it, like, wow, this seems like it's going to rock, and then it just sucks because either the characters are not developed appropriately, or the premise has a good initial first episode, but then it just fizzles out. It doesn't even take a wild turn where you sort of hate it all of a sudden, it just fizzles out. It's just depressing to watch by the end, and so many good premises are not capitalized on because regardless of the premise, you can take anything and make it work. You just need good characters and good writing, and that is exactly what Orb has. The way Orb uses its characters is very thought-provoking because it doesn't necessarily explore its characters for the sake of the character itself, as is usual in most stories. One could argue that the main character in this story is the idea of heliocentrism, which is getting baton passed for each and every character as they unfortunately pass away, and so their aspirations and ideals pass on to the other characters who most of the time reinterpret them in very unique ways that are particular to themselves. Each of the characters, each of the main protagonists in this story is very different from the previous one and approaches the idea of heliocentrism and how to go about it very differently, and they wouldn't necessarily all get along if they were together in a room, but still it is very fascinating to see the different perspectives and how each character goes about it. Some characters want to have their name echoed in the stories forever, they want to leave a mark. Others are purely inspired by their curiosity. What if we know is wrong? What if this theory is right? And some others use it almost as an opportunity to answer their existential questions that they may have, as a sort of gateway to rediscover themselves and rediscover the questions that they have about life, which sometimes are not answered by the church. And speaking of the church, it is one of the things I love about this anime, which is they treated the idea of the church and of God himself very tastefully. You have various characters grappling with God. What does it mean to believe in him? And these are very thought-provoking ideas, but are handled in a way that is very palatable. It's not the usual Western slop, I just have to call it out. It is what it is, right? It's not the usual Western slop where it's, instead of having these sort of shades of gray and trying to actually tackle an idea and present different perspectives and make it interesting and make it relatable to normal human beings, it sort of just boils down to this very boring black and white morality of church bad, God bad, science good, durr. And we don't have any of that. The idea of God and church, the way it's handled in this anime is very, very interesting. And it's just something that I love to see, all the different monologues between various characters. And I'm not super familiar with a lot of theology and these theories. And so each and every character seemed like they sort of had a point. And some of them I agreed with more. But each character presented such a different perspective that it was very interesting to sort of end the episode, and instead of going to the next one right away to binging, I was sort of reflecting a bit on what I had just watched and what my opinion would be, how I would react or argue in certain situations. I will say, for the sake of being nitpicky, I do think that some of the characters, in fact all of the characters in this series, are way too eloquent, and especially a character like Oxy, who is this sort of peasant who learned to read literally like yesterday. He has speeches which are complete fire, don't get me wrong. I was in awe of some of the speeches and reflections that he did, but at the same time it's like, I know a lot of people from villages and poor backgrounds and people who are not super literate, and they do not speak like this, let's just put it that way. Especially in those medieval ages where information was hard to come by and schooling and proper education was very hard to get. Every single character is way too eloquent, especially those who should not be, but the speeches are just so fun and the dialogue is just so engrossing that I sort of just roll with it. But in terms of immersion, if you think about it from that perspective, it can get a bit silly. Another thing I love about Orb is how seriously it takes itself and how seriously it presents itself. It is very serious throughout, and there's not these jarring sort of comedic moments which happen all of a sudden and just break the flow, and so many anime, especially these more shonen-esque anime, fall into this trap where we're having a serious moment and all of a sudden there's this funny gag or this comedic character. There's none of that in Orb. It stays serious throughout, and it is precisely because of that I think Orb is a great gateway anime, a great anime for normies. And I hate this word, but you know what I mean. What I mean is, it is a great anime for people who are not usually fans of anime. And don't get me wrong, I love many anime which are filled with the typical anime cliches, but I think these gateway anime who present themselves as more serious and more adult and don't rely so much on the fan service and the stuff that may turn off certain types of people, I think anime like Orb, Vinland Saga are very important as a sort of gateway to the genre. And I know there's a segment of anime fans which for some reason hate that series get popular because of the tourists. Oh no, people who do not enjoy as much stuff as I do, oh, the tragedy. But I truly think that it is great to have these types of anime to introduce more people to the genre and to show to certain people that may be skeptical that animation can be serious, can take itself serious, and can show truly adult stories. What inspired me the most about Orb is its sort of underlying love for humanity, the sheer lengths that humans are willing to go, the tenacity, the resilience to prove something to be true, to follow their own passions, their own curiosities, to do whatever it needs to do the thing they think is right, sometimes both on the side of good and on the side of evil. We have one of the best villains of the entire year, and he's just a dude who is working his 9 to 5 and wants to provide for his family. He's such a nice guy, but from his perspective, he's the hero, but he's also an incredible villain at the same time. So the duality of man, the way that they portray humanity as able to be so good and so kind and so cruel at the same time, it's just truly a thought-inspiring and thought-provoking piece. I thought right away from episode 1 that the anime was very interesting from the tone and presentation alone, and I thought that the child prodigy is a sort of interesting main character, nothing that hasn't never been done, but still an interesting premise to me. And I thought that from episode 3 onwards, I was like, oh no. This is very good, because it was a Game of Thrones-like twist. I did not expect it to get so dark and so ballsy so quick. And so Orb, even though I don't think it had a slow start, I think it was good from the very beginning, I do think that it quickly ramps up very, very exponentially, and it just gets better and better from there. The atmosphere this anime has is just unmatched, and you can see this right away from the first few episodes with the main character looking at the stars, and the sky feels so immense, so grandiose, and it really puts the series in perspective, like how small humans are and yet how much there is out there to discover. Even from a symbolism perspective, the anime is truly beautiful and presented in a beautiful way. Even though I have to say, I put this in my notes and it is a bit of a nitpick, but it is true, because so much of the stargazing is done during the night, this series can get a little bit dark at times. If you're watching this with your monitor with not the brightness on the maximum level, and if you have the windows open, you can have a bit of a hard time, but still, the series is very good, and so are the night scenes, they're very good as well. Despite all of the praise I've given Orb though, there is one thing in particular I didn't love. I didn't hate, but I didn't love as well, which was the ending. And this may be controversial, but I was not a huge fan of the ending. Because of the way the YouTube algorithm works, I'm assuming you're not watching this video and you haven't gotten this far in the video if you haven't watched Orb already. But in case you haven't watched it for some strange reason, go watch it right now and then come back to this video. But until then, spoilers for the ending. My particular interpretation of the ending was that everything we had seen up until that point was a fictional story, perhaps written by Albert, loosely related to things that may or may not have happened. I'm not a huge fan of these more open endings which leave the viewer thinking, because sometimes, a lot of the times, I think it's a little bit of cope that the writers cannot think of a satisfying conclusion, and so they leave it open-ending as a sort of cope, as a sort of cop-out. But I don't think it was necessarily a cop-out in this particular case. I think this is what the author was going for. I think it was intentional. I think it's his style of writing. It fits. However, I was still not a huge fan of it. By having this sort of fictional story, or some people said it was a parallel universe, which I really don't like that theory as much. I think it's a bit goofy, but either way, whatever it was, it sort of undermines the sacrifice and the sort of common thread that the characters had pulled throughout the entire story. It is sort of narratively deflating in my mind. Even if their names had been forgotten to history, and most likely they would be, it would still be more cathartic to have the sacrifices that they built up and summed up, and the extent that they used their lives to actually mean something in the end. Instead, it was sort of discarded or thrown away in a way that was a bit unsatisfying, because yes, even though a lot of these characters unfortunately passed away, their sacrifices are still real in the minds of the audience, and to sort of have this meta fiction within a fiction didn't sit well with me, because I think that for a series like this, which celebrates humanity and celebrates the sacrifice and celebrates people's resilience and the things people are willing to go through to push their own ideals and to fight for what they believe, I wanted a more cathartic ending where their sacrifices mattered more. Either way, this is my particular nitpick. I still gave this anime a 10 out of 10 on my anime list, and not that it matters much, because my anime list ratings are complete garbage, including my own, by the way. I look at some of the ratings I gave when I was a teenager, and I'm just appalled by the horrifying stuff that goes on in there. Maybe one day I'll roast my own page, but either way, I still gave this anime a 10 out of 10. I think it is very close to perfection, and even though I may have perhaps narrative or philosophical disagreements with the way the ending was structured, I still enjoyed it a lot. I love this anime. It was very good. So to go back to my main point, yes, this goes straight into S tier in case I redid my ranking, and now looking back, the Crunchyroll Awards look even worse, because why was Kaiju number 8, and I don't want to keep beating this horse, but why was Kaiju number 8 so represented when Orb was so good? It's just insane. But either way, even though this doesn't have the typical shonen cliches and the Sakuga moments and the incredible fights and the side heroine with the big breasts, I still think that this anime was very, very good. Would it be anime of the year to me? That is a tough question. I have to think about that one, because I still very much enjoy some of my good anime cliches, and ReZero is one of my favorite anime of all time, and so I would have to think about it. But if you voted this for anime of the year, I would have no problem with that. I think it is a very worthy contender. So for this video, as you could probably guess, this was very much not scripted. I had very little time to prepare. I just wrote up some quick notes. So I gave this completely raw. So let me know in the comments what you think. And please don't comment, give it to me raw, because YouTube will auto flag you, obviously. But please don't comment that. But either way, let me know what you think of this style of video. I've been sort of ranging from everything to scripted to semi-scripted to now just complete raw dogging it. So let me know what you think, and be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Ciao!